Now, humans are very good at empathy. They're very, very good at imagining what it's like to be someone else. In fact, some psychologists have argued it's the reason that we're so successful as a species, because we're able to see into other minds. What we are absolutely hopeless at as a species is seeing into other times. So it's very, very difficult for us to work out what it's like to live 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And the problem that presents is that our idea of what's normal is pretty much generational. So we are brought up with our kind of parents' expectations for what is normal for the human body, and then we take that forwards into our life. And so change never seems to happen, very, very quickly, because it happens over generations. But to try to encompass the change that the Industrial Revolution brought about for the human bodies is so difficult. I mean, if you look around you now, some of you have got windows that you can look out of, but literally every single thing that you can see in your eye line, in your room, probably even in your garden, has come about as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Now that seems like it's a very long time to us, 200 to 300 years. But if you imagine that if we compress the lifetime of human species, if we compress that into the 9 to 5 of a working day, where humans get up on 2 feet at 9 a.m., the Industrial Revolution, you'd think probably happens at about 4:30 or 4:45 or something like that. You'd think it happens quite late. The Industrial Revolution comes and goes in the time that it would take you to sneeze, just before 5 p.m. So it's an absolutely tiny amount of time. And evolution works very, very slowly. So our bodies are still struggling to try and keep up with these changes. And what I found out when I was writing my book and when we were doing the shows is that this is happening in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of parts of your snap. This is happening in all sorts of ways, like all over your body, from the tips of your toes, probably up to about here, just in your face. If you were born 100 years ago, no, that's not true. If you were born 250 years ago, your jaw would be, it would probably protrude slightly further from your face, which means that your head would protrude further out the back to maintain center of gravity. You can really see this change in the human skull. It's really pronounced in the last sort of 5 to 10,000 years ago. So that means that modern humans' brains are actually smaller because the skull never gets to grow large enough. Our faces are also narrower. Lots of us now have to wear specs. So that's just the changes that are happening here. I won't ask everyone to bare their teeth, but almost all of our teeth are crooked. And if they're not crooked, the reason they're not crooked is probably because you've had 1 or 2 removed to make space for the other teeth that are coming through. I'm in my early 50s, and half of my wisdom teeth still haven't come through yet. And this is because our jaws are so understimulated by the modern diet that they never actually get to grow big enough to house our adult teeth. So these changes, that's some of the changes that are taking place in the head, from the width of your elbows to the strength of your wrists, to the muscle and bone density in your hands, all the way down to the tips of your toes. Our bodies are changing. So fast forwarding through, tens of thousands of years of human history, how do we know what a human body used to be like? So humans have been around in various forms for about 2 million years. And we all know that we used to run and that we used to climb. I think humans probably ran maybe a bit less than we think they did. But they certainly were up on their feet for most of the day. Chairs were probably invented about 5,000 years ago. So again, that's probably about 4:50 p.m. If humans start at 9 a.m., chairs arrive at about 4:50 p.m. That's not to say that humans didn't sit down before then. It's just to say that when they did sit down, there wasn't much for them to do. So sedentary work as we know it, sedentary leisure probably comes about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, when you start to have slaves, when you have slaves that do your work for you, when you have slaves and wives. Leisure starts to emerge then, and the chair kind of becomes synonymous with leisure, that the person who has power is the one that can enjoy leisure, and the person that has power is also the one that has a chair. So the amount of work that could be done in a chair is really, really quite small. You can't hunt in a chair. You can't make a hut in a chair. You can't make a bed in a chair. So it's not really until about the 19th century that you start to see chairs explode. So I'm a literary historian originally by trade. And if you go back through literary history, there are no chairs in either the Iliad or the Odyssey of Homer. There are some benches mentioned in the Odyssey, but there are no chairs. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, in Chaucer there are no chairs. In Shakespeare's Hamlet there are no chairs. And then in King Lear you have three. And in fact, the first mention of a chair in King Lear is enter King Lear, carried in a chair, everyone kneels. Now King Lear is about 1607, so there are no chairs at all in literature until the early modern period. And then if you fast forward through to the 19th century to Dickens's Bleak House, which I don't have here, so 1852 to 1853, after no chairs in anything, all of a sudden there are 187 chairs in Bleak House. Go on, go for it. No, you haven't got it. All of a sudden there are 187 chairs in Bleak House. So something happened in the mid-19th century that just meant chairs proliferated like a virus. So it's not just the fact that you had, excuse me, it's not just the fact that you had industry that was able to make chairs. There's a very famous bistro chair that's a lovely sort of curled design and has a rounded seat that's woven. Those went into mass production in 1859. So it's not just that you have the ability to produce lots and lots of chairs, because there's no point in doing that if nobody needs them. So what started to happen was sedentary work began to become more popular. So in the 1840s, like in Dickens's A Christmas Carol, or if you don't know that, then The Muppet Christmas Carol, Kermit and the Muppet Christmas Carol, it's the same thing. So Bob Cratchit would sit in a chair while he worked at his accounts. But even then, they would have been working with heavy ledgers. They'd have been walking to work. Clerks walked so much that the paving stones on London Bridge got worn smooth and had to be chiselled to be roughened up so that people wouldn't keep slipping over on them. So that would still involve there was still some physical effort in sedentary work. And then what's happened to us is that as time has gone on, sedentary work has become normal. It's the normal way to work now. It started off that in the 1840s it was about 0.02% of the population. It was a tiny percentage of people that were doing sedentary work, and now it's I think the Office for National Statistics doesn't collect data in the UK on sedentary work, but in the US I think the number is about 85% of people in the workforce do sedentary work. So it's probably something between 70 and 85% of people doing sedentary work. But even sedentary work has become more sedentary. Nobody's dealing with heavy ledgers anymore. We're all working from home, so we don't even get to go anywhere. Nobody's going to the photocopier anymore. Nobody's going to the fax machine anymore. Everything happens, here on the other side of a tiny bit of glass. So sedentary work in itself is not the problem. It's the fact that sedentary work has become even more sedentary. So our sense of what's normal for the human body has become just really, really warped. It's really, really strange, because we think back to the beginning of our generation, to our early lives. Lots of that is written off as just childhood, and we just think, no, lots of that activity is just about being a child. But if you think about basic activities like cleaning a rug, so 70 years ago, you'd roll up the rug. Well, first of all, you'd move the furniture out of the way. You'd roll up the rug. You'd put it on your shoulder. You'd take it out to the backyard, put it over the line or the wall, and then you'd whack the bejesus out of it for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, and then you roll it back up, put it on your shoulder, take it back into the room, roll it back out, and put the furniture back. So that's a calorie burn of about 200 calories, maybe 300, but about 200 calories. Now, once you fast forward through a few sort of technological changes, once you fast forward through a few of these technological changes, and you get the Eubank. Is anyone else old enough to remember the Eubank? It was crap. It was like a stick with some spinning brushes on the end of it. It didn't really do anything, but it gathered up the dust, supposedly. And then you get the vacuum cleaner. And the vacuum cleaner, it still required work. These things were like miniature tanks. The vacuum cleaner then becomes the Dyson, which is just a handheld. So, there's very little weight to it, and you work quickly with this light machine for 7 minutes until the battery runs out, and then your cleaning is finished. And now, you just go like this, and the RoboVac goes to work. So that's, with that one task, that's a calorie drop of about 1,000%. It's gone from a 200 calorie burn to about 0.2 calories. And this is happening in all aspects of our life. Most of you probably drive. And it's driving a car doesn't have power assisted steering is like trying to do a handbrake turn in a pirate ship. It's a lot of work. And when was the last time anybody did this in a car? To wind up a window. So it's this slow incremental creep of technology that's taxing our movement, and it's making it more difficult for us to move. So what's normal for the human body is now has been destroyed by technology. We have no sense of what's normal. We do have one idea. There's an illustration in here, but I'll carry on talking to see if I can find it. We do have one idea about what technology has done to our bones. So there was research done about 2 years ago now that looked at the bone density, the differing bone density of the hands. And what they found was that, so that's the illustration. Does that work? You can't really see it, can you? Anyway, the idea is that they looked at bone density from different times. One was from before agriculture. Agriculture begins about 10,000 years ago. So they looked at the bone density of specimens before agriculture, and they found that there was a general drop of about 30% in the bone density and the size of the muscle attachments. And the muscle attachments on the bones are indicative of muscle size. So they found that on the whole, when we moved from hunting as a species to agriculture, on the whole, there was about a 30% drop in bone density and strength. Separate studies that have been done in Germany looked at the at humeral rigidity, so the bone density of the upper arm in women, and they were looking at agriculturalist women. And what they found, and they compared those to modern specimens, was that between agricultural women and modern women, there was a drop of about 30%. So we have a drop of about 30% going from hunter-gathering to agriculture, and then another drop of about 30% from agriculture to modern times. Now, 30%, you just think, oh, well, surely, all I could do, I just go to the gym, 2 weeks later, I'd be able to lift 30% more weight. But it doesn't work like that, because just because you can lift 30% more weight doesn't mean your bones have become 30% more dense. To give you some sense of what that 30% means, they found that these agricultural women from northern Eurasia, so around the German region now, they found that their upper arm bones demonstrated greater bone density and more strength than modern Olympic rowers. So that's what the 30% means. If you imagine the total commitment to arm strength that you need to be an Olympic rower, then these people that worked in farming five years ago were stronger than that. And then if you try to imagine again that they are 30% weaker than how we were when we were hunter-gatherers, you can see that the body has about 49% of the strength and density that it had 20,000 years ago. So our sense of what is normal for the modern body is just really, really warped. I'll stop.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Vibar. I'm just watching the timer on this Zoom call, and so we need to bring Ben in to talk about the implications of these. Obviously, just summarising Vibar's talk there is basically, literally, we are pathetic. Physically, we are pathetic nowadays compared to what we were, and that's because of the way our lives are changing. So thanks very much for that, for Vibar. Let's move now over to Benedict Heaver. If you could take your mic. Oh, lovely. So what can we do with regards to this lack of activity? How can we arrange our offices and our workspaces in order to respond to the findings that Vibar has found?
Thanks, Sean. It's a really good question. I suppose I don't actually have a desk in the office. I don't have anywhere really to sit. That's mainly because I'm in and out of various meetings and things like that. But one of the things that we did 18 months ago is we started to replace all our desks with standing desks, so people can sit, they can stand at those and things like that. And I think a lot of this is coming through the sort of technology sector and things like that, because we are very sedentary and things like that. We then noticed that people actually started to acquire some of these sort of balance balls. So instead of sitting on chairs, we have people who sort of interchange onto balance balls and things like that around the office. During the time of us all working from home and things like that, we're actually now replacing all of the desks apart from the meeting rooms, because there don't seem to be the sort of technology yet there. But with standing desks and things like that. The other thing that we look into a lot is around sort of the wellness of the people in the office, and it gets very sort of. We don't want to give necessarily everyone gym memberships, because then the only people who take them up are the people who would have gone anyway, and we haven't had the effect and things like that. So we've looked over to sort of Scandinavia and some of the things that they run over there. So we've been running various things internally. So annually we have a sort of step challenge where we encourage everyone to get out. If they average 10,000 steps a day, there's an overall winner, but everyone who completes that gets an extra day's holiday and things like that. So we find sort of motivating people through that way is much more beneficial than necessarily giving them the gym membership and things like that. But it is a constant worry. We've been running various things, so we're very fortunate. One of the ladies in the office, she's actually got a sporting degree and things like that, so she's been running sort of multi-activity competition and things like that during the whole of the lockdown to keep people active. So we realised we couldn't do the 10,000 steps a day and things like that. We also linked that to our charity. So we used to get people to donate to do that. So this year we don't feel it's necessarily right to ask people to donate to charity. So instead of having a prize for someone, when we launched the step challenge now, that the restrictions are being eased, that the company is actually going to donate for people. So there's a motivation comes from that. And it's to us, it's finding that bit of how you motivate people to actually go and do it off their own volition, rather than, we don't want this sort of whole big brother aspect of, telling them what to do. but the standing desks and the balance balls and things like that have been really, really sort of beneficial.
That's a great idea, Ben, actually.
One of the reasons that we put them in.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
And
one
actually,
of the reasons we put them in was we were seeing people eating.
Actually, at that point, I can see the timer gradually seeping away, and no doubt others have got the other rooms to go back into. What I will do is I commit to maybe hooking up with Vibar to do something else in a little bit more detail, and then linking that back to this, and the same with Ben, because obviously there's a lot there that we can do in order to improve our health in the office. On the background of the knowledge of how modern life is affecting our health, and what's more important than health. We can't do anything without our health. So what I'll do is I'll link, I'll make sure that everyone, I'll probably share on my LinkedIn profile, that's the best place to do it. I'll make sure I've shared Vibar's links with regards to the BBC Sounds podcast that he's done. I'll also link into Ben if anyone wants to hook up with Ben on LinkedIn and discuss what they've done and maybe apply that to their office space, then that can happen. But separate from this, I'll try and maybe arrange a more in-depth interview of both Vibar and Ben so that people can benefit further. Appreciate today is it's a first for Gusto and the Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce. So the technical issues that prevented everyone getting into the room to start with, apologies for that. But I hope you've enjoyed listening to our speakers. You see, someone's already got the book, Climate Change. I love that title. Although I do notice that's paper. We shouldn't be using paper nowadays. Oh, Sapiens. Yeah, that's a great book as well. Right, thanks everyone. I have put in the link in the chat, a link to get back to the main conference. You can use that. Otherwise, you can go straight to the email that you got directly from Gusto or Lincolnshire Chamber, wherever you came in, and click that link and go back into the meeting. So lastly, a big thank you to Vibar for joining us this morning. Fascinating material there. And Ben, thank you for giving us your experience. And thank you everyone to attending.